Margaret Chen's alarm pulsed at 5:30 a.m., a soft vibration through the neural implant behind her ear, the kind of outdated tech most people had upgraded 3 cycles ago. She dismissed it with a thought, her eyes opening to the dim light filtering through curtains that didn't auto-adjust to circadian rhythms because she'd disabled that feature years ago. The apartment was quiet in a way that modern smart homes never were. No ambient AI suggesting optimal wake routines, no holographic news feeds materializing unbidden, no environmental systems announcing they'd prepared her morning coffee, just silence. And Margaret preferred it that way. She rose from a bed with actual springs instead of molecular foam, her feet finding worn carpet instead of temperature-regulated flooring. The apartment was 2 bedrooms in a neighborhood where historic preservation was code for, hasn't been gentrified yet, buildings from the 2020s that still required physical keys, mailboxes you opened by hand, neighbors who knocked on doors instead of sending proximity alerts. Her morning routine was analog by choice. She measured instant coffee, the kind that came in jars, not dissolvable flavor pods, and boiled water in a kettle that required her to turn a dial. The oatmeal came from a cardboard canister she'd bought at a farmer's market where humans still exchanged currency for goods without blockchain verification. While the water heated, Margaret pulled up engineering journals on her tablet, third-generation tech that required manual scrolling, that didn't track her eye movements to curate content, that simply displayed information without trying to optimize her consumption patterns. She read about advances in autonomous traffic management systems, her fingers occasionally pausing to trace equations on the screen, solving problems in her head that most engineers needed AI assistance to approach. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman reading about cutting-edge technology on obsolete hardware had written half the foundational algorithms these new systems were built on, but nobody on the number 47 bus would know that. Margaret dressed in clothes that screamed, retired on a fixed income, slacks from Costco's house brand, a cardigan from Target's clearance rack, sensible shoes designed for comfort rather than the embedded health monitoring tech that sent real-time biometric data to your physician. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, no smart glass offering makeup suggestions or skin health analysis, just regular glass reflecting a 52-year-old woman who'd stopped caring what people thought, except she did care. That was the problem, she cared that her son was ashamed of her. She cared that her late husband's family treated her like an embarrassing obligation. She cared that she'd spent 4 years living like this, small, modest, deliberately invisible, to test whether the people in her life valued her for who she was rather than what she had. The test results were in. They'd failed spectacularly. Margaret's phone, an older model with actual buttons, the kind people assumed meant poverty rather than preference, buzzed with a text message, "Derek, Mom, reminder about next Friday. The launch party. Probably better if you skip this one. Investor-heavy crowd." You know how boring that gets. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'll think about it." His response was immediate. "Thanks for understanding." Smiling face with smiling eyes. Margaret deleted the thread and finished her coffee, across the city. In a penthouse that occupied the entire 43rd floor of a building Margaret technically owned, Derek Chen woke to his smart home's gentle optimization sequence. The bedroom's molecular glass walls shifted from opaque to transparent, revealing a panoramic view of the city skyline. The environmental system adjusted temperature and humidity to his preferred waking parameters. A holographic display materialized near the bed, showing his vitals, his schedule, his social media engagement metrics from overnight. Instagram followers, 47,340, 127, engagement rate, 4.2%, above average. Crypto Flow app downloads, 3,847, trending upward. Derek smiled. Numbers going up meant success. That's what everyone said. Vivian stirred beside him, her own neural implant already active. He could tell by the way her eyes moved beneath closed lids, scrolling through her feed before she was fully conscious. She'd explained it once, her followers expected morning content, and the algorithm punished delays. "Morning," she mumbled, reaching for her phone without opening her eyes. Within seconds, she was filming, "Good morning, loves. Starting the day in our favorite place with my favorite person. Today's vibe is gratitude and hustle energy." Derek had learned to smile automatically for her content. He was a recurring character in her narrative, my amazing boyfriend, the entrepreneur, couple goals. His face appeared in hundreds of her posts, always carefully framed to suggest success, the penthouse windows behind them, the designer furniture, the lifestyle that said we've made it. What her 500,000 followers didn't know, Derek paid rent of $1 per month. What he didn't know, his mother received building management reports detailing every noise complaint, every instance of property damage, every violation of building codes, 23 noise complaints in 4 years. The latest was from last Tuesday, a party that went until 3 a.m., music so loud that residents on the 41st floor filed formal protests. Margaret had read the report on her tablet while eating her instant oatmeal. Her jaw tight with disappointment. Launch party planning today, Derek said, scrolling through his own device. Sent out 50 invitations. Got 38 confirmed RSVPs, tech journalists, venture capitalists, influencer friends of Vivian's. This is going to be huge. Did you invite your mom? Vivian asked absently, adjusting her hair for the camera. Derek's fingers paused. Nah. Not really her scene. Too industry specific, that's probably good. No offense, but... Vivian lowered her voice even though they were alone. My followers ask about your family sometimes. The whole, self-made entrepreneur narrative plays better if we don't highlight them, modest background stuff. Totally, Derek agreed quickly. That's what I figured. He'd told Vivian his mother was retired on a fixed income, living in a modest apartment, definitely not someone who influenced his success story. The narrative he'd constructed was seamless. Hardworking son, humble beginnings, built everything himself through hustle and innovation. The truth was more complicated. But truth didn't trend as well as inspiration. His phone buzzed. A message from Uncle Richard. Uncle Richard, board meeting this afternoon. Commercial property proposal. Need all partners present. Mandatory, Derek groaned. His uncle's board meetings were really just family dinners where Richard pitched increasingly aggressive schemes to acquire more property. Expand the family real estate portfolio, consolidate wealth. Derek attended because Richard had promised to introduce him to high-level investors. What Derek didn't know, Richard's entire commercial real estate empire was over-leveraged to the point of collapse, sustained by creative accounting and aggressive borrowing against properties that were worth less than their mortgages. What Derek also didn't know, his mother had quietly been buying Richard's debt through intermediary investment firms, accumulating leverage that she could call in at any moment, but Margaret didn't call it in. She just watched, documented, and waited to see if anyone would ever ask about her life instead of assuming she had nothing to offer. The restaurant Richard had chosen for this month's family board meeting was exactly the kind of place designed to photograph well, ambient lighting optimized for social media, holographic menu displays that projected your meal choices into augmented reality, servers with neural implants that anticipated your needs before you verbalized them. Margaret arrived by bus, her cloth purse slung over one shoulder, her cardigan slightly wrinkled from the humid evening air. The hostess looked at her with barely concealed confusion. Clearly not the usual clientele. I'm here for the chin party, Margaret said quietly, of course. The hostess's professional smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Right this way, the private dining room was already occupied. Uncle Richard held court at the head of the table, his augmented reality contact lenses displaying real-time market data that he gestured through with practiced ease. Aunt Linda sat beside him, her outfit algorithm selected for maximum social media impact, each piece chosen by AI to complement her features, the lighting, and current fashion trends. Derek and Vivian occupied the other end of the table, already filming content. Family dinner vibe. Hello, Richard, you're looking well. That cardigan is very comfortable. Aunt Linda leaned over, her perfume, algorithmically optimized for her personal chemistry, overwhelming in its intensity. Maggie, honey, we need to talk about your wardrobe situation. I follow this amazing personal styling AI that could really help you update your look. Very affordable subscription model. I'm fine with what I have, Linda, of course you are. But sometimes it's not about what we want, it's about how we're perceived, right? First impressions, social positioning, all that. Linda's smile was sharp with concern. People might think Derek isn't helping you out if you're still shopping at, discount retailers. Margaret's hands tightened around her cloth napkin, actual fabric, not the disposable smart material most restaurants used. Derek doesn't need to help me out, well, obviously not financially. He's doing so well with his startup, but image-wise. Family appearance matters in business. Richard always says networking is 90% perception. Derek looked up from his phone, guilt flickering across his face before he suppressed it. Mom's comfortable with her style. We should respect that, of course. Linda agreed, her tone suggesting the opposite. Comfort is very important. Not everyone needs to be visible. The word hung in the air like an insult wrapped in kindness. Dinner progressed through its carefully orchestrated phases. Richard pitched his Morrison property scheme, a commercial building he wanted to acquire, as a family, which really meant he wanted everyone to invest while he maintained control. The numbers he presented were optimistic to the point of fantasy, projected returns that defied market reality. Margaret listened in silence, doing the math in her head. The Morrison building was overvalued by at least 30%. Richard's financing plan relied on leverage that assumed permanent growth, no market corrections, no unexpected variables. It was the kind of aggressive real estate play that collapsed spectacularly when conditions shifted. She said nothing. Let them learn through experience, or not learn at all. Maggie, you're quiet, Richard observed. What do you think about the Morrison opportunity? I think, Margaret said carefully, that you should run more conservative projections. Factor in market volatility, maintenance costs, vacancy rates during economic downturns. Richard laughed, not unkindly, but patronizing. Always the careful one. That's why you and David were such a good team. He'd dream big, you'd make sure the numbers worked. He waved his hand dismissively. But this is different. This is vision. Sometimes you have to take risks to build real wealth. David and I took plenty of risks, Margaret said quietly. Calculated ones, sure. Engineering projects, patents, all that technical stuff. But real estate is about instinct, about seeing opportunities others miss. Richard leaned forward. Speaking of which, I've been thinking, that building downtown? The one David left you? The maintenance costs must be killing you. I could take it off your hands, give you a fair price. Family discount, of course. What's a fair price? Margaret asked. I'm thinking $2 million. Maybe 2.2 if the inspection goes well. That's generous for a building that age, especially with the maintenance issues. Margaret took a sip of water. The building was worth $4.2 million in the current market. Richard knew this, or would if he'd done actual research. He was counting on her being too naive, too sentimental, too comfortable being invisible, to challenge him. I'll think about it, she said, don't think too long. Richard's smile was all teeth. Opportunities like this don't wait. Plus, wouldn't it be nice to have some liquid capital? Take a real vacation, upgrade your living situation, enjoy your retirement properly, Aunt Linda jumped in. Oh, Maggie, you should. Imagine, you could get one of those assisted living communities with all the amenities. Very modern, very safe. They have social activities, health monitoring, everything optimized for senior living. I'm 52. Margaret said. Not exactly senior living age. Well, no, of course not. I just meant, planning ahead. Being practical. Linda's laugh was nervous. Though honestly, honey, you do seem tired lately. Maybe it's all that bus riding? The stress of maintaining David's building on your own? Richard could really help with that burden. Margaret set down her napkin and stood. Excuse me. I need some air. She walked out of the private dining room, through the main restaurant, past the holographic displays and optimized ambience, and stood on the sidewalk in the humid evening air. Her hands were shaking, not with anger, but with the accumulated weight of years of these dinners. These conversations, this relentless assumption that she was small, helpless, irrelevant. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elena Volkov, her attorney, and Margaret was starting to realize something more. Elena, how's the family dinner? Should I send emergency extraction? Margaret smiled despite herself. Elena had attended exactly one Chin family dinner before declaring it performance art disguised as networking and refusing to return without hazard pay. Margaret, surviving. Richard wants to buy the building again. Linda suggested assisted living. Elena, I'm booking you a spa day. You've earned it. Also, reminder, you don't have to keep subjecting yourself to this, Margaret, one more month. I want to see Derek's launch party. After that, I'm done, Elena, I'll be there. Someone needs to watch your back. Margaret looked at the message for a long moment, then typed, thank you. For everything, Elena, that's what friends do. And for the record, you're the least invisible person I know. When Margaret returned to the table, dessert had arrived, something molecular and architectural, more sculpture than food. Derek was filming it for Vivian's Instagram story, narrating about celebrating family success. Margaret ate her dessert in silence, making plans. One more month. One more party. One more chance to see if her son would ever ask about her life instead of hiding her from his. And then, whether he passed the test or not, she was done being invisible. The algorithm of her patience had run its final iteration. 5 days before the launch party, Derek called his mother. It was exactly 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Margaret noted the time because Derek's calls had become so infrequent that each one felt like an event worth documenting. Hey Mom. His voice was cheerful, performative. She could hear traffic in the background, which meant he was between meetings, squeezing her into his schedule between more important things. Hello, Derek. How are you? Good, good. Busy with launch prep. Actually, that's why I'm calling. He paused, and Margaret could hear him choosing his words carefully. So the launch party next Friday, I've been looking forward to it, Margaret said, surprising herself with her directness. Another pause, longer this time. Right. Yeah. So here's the thing. It's going to be really industry-focused. Venture capitalists, tech journalists, that whole scene. Lots of investor presentations, technical demos, probably boring for anyone not in the space. I worked in tech for 30 years, Derek. Well, yeah, but this is different. This is crypto, AI-assisted trading, blockchain infrastructure. Not really the same as civil engineering. Margaret's grip tightened on her coffee mug. I understand AI systems pretty well, sure, but... Derek's voice shifted, becoming almost pleading. Look, Mom, can I be honest? These investors, they're looking at the whole package when they evaluate founders. Background, network, resources, everything. And if they see, if they get the impression that I'm coming from a place of financial struggle, are you? Margaret interrupted quietly. What? Coming from a place of financial struggle? No. Obviously not. The startup's funded, I've got the penthouse, everything's solid. He rushed on before she could ask where that funding came from. But perception matters. If they see my mom taking the bus, living in a rent-controlled apartment, wearing, no offense, budget clothes, they might think I don't have the resources or network for success. Silence stretched between them. Derek, Margaret said finally, are you asking me not to come to your launch party? I'm not asking you not to come. I'm just suggesting that maybe it's not the best fit for you. Maybe we could do dinner after, just the two of us, celebrate privately. When was the last time we had dinner? Just the two of us, he didn't answer immediately. Margaret could picture him scrolling through his calendar app, trying to remember. It's been a few months, yeah. I know I've been bad about that. But after the launch, things will calm down and we can. Derek, I'm your mother. I'd like to support your business launch. His voice hardened slightly. And I'm trying to protect my business interests. This isn't about an image that doesn't include your mother, an image that doesn't include complications. Look, you don't understand how this world works. Everything's about branding now, about curating your narrative. The investors who'll be there, they're not looking at my app's features. They're looking at me, at my story, at whether I fit their model of what a successful founder looks like, and I don't fit that model. You fit a different model. A great model. The loving, retired mom who lives modestly and taught me good values. But not the tech industry success story model. Can you understand that? Margaret understood perfectly. She understood that her son measured her worth by how she photographed. By whether she enhanced or diminished his personal brand, by whether she was an asset or a liability in his performance of success. I'll think about it, she said, Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand. You're the best. Relief flooded his voice. Okay, I've got another call coming in. Talk soon. He hung up before she could answer. Margaret sat at her small kitchen table, staring at her phone, feeling something inside her calcify into decision. For years of living modestly, of taking the bus, of wearing Target cardigans and carrying Tupperware to family dinners. For years of giving Derek every opportunity to value her for who she was rather than what she appeared to have. And he'd failed. Spectacularly, conclusively, painfully. She pulled up her banking app, the one that required 3 levels of biometric security because of the amounts it managed, and looked at numbers most people couldn't fathom. Total liquid assets, $24,435,133. Then she opened her contacts and found Elena Volkov's number. Margaret, I'm going to the party. Elena, good. Want backup? Margaret, please, Elena, I'll be there. And Maggie? It's time to stop being small for people who should have seen you all along. Margaret looked at the message for a long time. Then she opened her closet and found the one nice outfit she owned. Simple, understated, the kind of clothing that cost more than most people realized but signaled wealth only to those who knew what to look for. She was going to Derek's launch party, and she was going to let him see, one final time, exactly who she'd chosen to become in his absence. Whether he recognized her or not would determine everything that came next. The penthouse had been transformed into a stage set for Derek's carefully curated narrative of success. Margaret stepped off the elevator into an assault of sensory optimization, ambient lighting programmed to shift through Instagram-friendly color palettes, electronic music calibrated to enhance conversation without overwhelming it, temperature controls that adjusted based on crowd density and individual biometric data from guests' neural implants. 50 people occupied the space with the precise choreography of professional networkers, venture capitalists in designer casual wear that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Tech journalists with recording implants capturing everything for later transcription, influencers holding their phones at practiced angles to film content that would be algorithmically enhanced before posting. Everyone was performing. And everyone was watching everyone else's performance, calculating social capital with the precision of day traders. Margaret stood in the entryway holding her Tupperware container of homemade dumplings, her father-in-law's recipe, the one Derek used to beg for as a child, and felt the weight of 48 years of technological evolution crushing down on her shoulders. Her clothes were analog in a digital world. Her presence was authentic in a space designed for curation. She looked, she knew, like someone's embarrassing relative who'd wandered into the wrong event. Several guests glanced at her and away, their neural implants probably already categorizing her as service staff or lost elderly person, based on visual processing algorithms trained on decades of class markers. Derek stood at the room's center, his arm around Vivian's waist, explaining Crypto Flow 2.0 to a semicircle of investors. He wore a suit that had been custom-tailored by an AI that analyzed his body metrics and social media presence to determine the optimal cut, fabric, and style for his personal brand. His gestures were practiced, his smile was bright, his entire presentation was a masterclass in founder performance. Paradigm shift in how we think about decentralized trading, he was saying, his voice carrying with practiced confidence. The algorithm learns from user behavior, adapts in real time, creates a truly responsive financial ecosystem. Then he saw her. Margaret watched her son's face cycle through emotions with the speed of neural processing. Confusion. Who authorized building access? Recognition. Oh God, it's Mom. Horror. She brought Tupperware. Panic. Everyone can see. Vivian spotted Margaret next. Her phone was already out, live streaming to her 500,000 followers, and her influencer instincts recognized content gold when she saw it. Okay fam, Vivian whispered into her phone. Zooming in on Margaret with predatory focus, plot twist alert. Looks like someone's family member just crashed the launch party dressed like they're headed to Costco? I cannot. This is peak awkward. Should I help? Should someone help? Drop a heart if you're dying right now. She added hashtags with her free hand. Hashtag family drama, hashtag send help, hashtag pray for Derek, hashtag cringe content. Her live viewer count climbed. 3,847 people watching in real time, commenting faster than human eyes could track. Margaret stood still, letting them see her, letting the moment crystallize. She'd spent 4 years being invisible. Tonight, she would be seen, on her terms, not theirs. Uncle Richard materialized at her elbow with the smooth efficiency of a man who'd spent decades managing uncomfortable situations. His augmented reality contacts were already pulling up social scripts, suggesting optimal phrases for damage control. Maggie. His voice boomed with false warmth, one hand on her shoulder steering her toward the kitchen with gentle but inexorable pressure. So glad you could help out tonight. The catering staff is through that door, you can leave those dumplings with them. Very thoughtful of you to contribute. Margaret allowed herself to be steered, saying nothing. She set the Tupperware on the kitchen counter next to professionally plated appetizers that cost $40 per serving. Molecular gastronomy designed more for social media documentation than actual consumption. A catering staff member looked at her dumplings with confusion. Clearly uncertain whether this was meant to be served or was simply someone's grandmother bringing food to her grandson, Aunt Linda appeared in the kitchen doorway, her outfit selected by an AI styling service that analyzed current fashion trends, her skin taut from weekly cellular regeneration treatments, her smile sharp with concern wrapped in condescension. Maggie, honey, you came. She air-kissed near Margaret's cheeks, careful not to disturb her makeup. I love that you're so comfortable with yourself. Not everyone can pull off the whole "I've stopped trying" aesthetic. It's very brave. Very authentic. I respect that, I really do. A young tech founder standing nearby, 24 years old. Wearing smart fabric that changed patterns based on his mood, smirked to his date. Is that someone's mom? Did she actually bring Tupperware to a launch party? That's some boomer energy right there, his date giggled, filming discreetly for her own social media. That's going to be a meme by tomorrow. Margaret accepted a glass of water from a server who looked at her with something like pity. Not champagne, she didn't drink, though no one in this room knew why, because no one had ever asked about her 15 years of sobriety, about the 2 years she'd spent destroying herself with alcohol after David died, about the rock bottom that had taught her what actually mattered. She moved through the crowd toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Feeling eyes track her movement, hearing whispered conversations pause and resume in her wake. The penthouse's smart glass could be programmed for privacy or transparency. Tonight it was crystal clear, showing off the city skyline like a trophy. Margaret looked out at the view and felt a complicated rush of emotions. She'd designed 3 of the bridges visible from this height. The traffic management system keeping millions of people moving safely through the city, that was partially her work. The autonomous vehicle infrastructure that was slowly reshaping urban transportation, her algorithms formed the foundation. She was, in every technical sense, more successful than everyone at this party combined. But she looked like someone's poor mother who'd brought homemade food to a catered event, and that, Margaret thought with bitter clarity, was exactly the test's result. After 4 years of living modestly, of taking the bus, of wearing Target cardigans, her family had learned nothing about looking beneath surfaces. They'd failed. All of them. Margaret was calculating how long she needed to stay before she could leave without Derek accusing her of making it about herself, when a voice spoke beside her, low and amused. The view's wasted on people who only see it as a backdrop for selfies. Margaret turned. A woman stood there, late 30s, striking in a way that suggested substance rather than style. She wore charcoal-tailored pants and a silk blouse, both pieces expensive in the understated way that only other wealthy people would recognize. Minimal jewelry except for a watch on her left wrist that Margaret identified immediately, vintage Patek Philippe, probably worth $80,000, the kind of timepiece that appreciated rather than depreciated. Elena Volkov extended her hand, and Margaret took it. The grip was firm, confident, warm in a way that sent unexpected electricity up Margaret's arm. Elena. I'm supposed to be meeting with Richard about a property investment, but I'm much more interested in why you're the only person at this party actually looking at the view instead of photographing it. Margaret allowed herself a small smile. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. I prefer experiencing moments to curating them for algorithmic approval. Old-fashioned. Elena's smile was slow, appreciative, her eyes never leaving Margaret's face. You say that like it's a flaw. I say it like it's a rarity worth investing in. The air between them shifted, charged. Electric, alive with possibility. Margaret felt heat rising to her cheeks, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years, maybe decades. This woman was looking at her, really looking, not through her or past her, but directly at her, seeing her. Derek appeared at Margaret's elbow, his face flushed from champagne and the adrenaline of performance. Mom, what are you, Elena? You made it. Have you met my... He hesitated, the word catching in his throat. My mother. She just stopped by to drop off some food. Elena's expression shifted subtly, imperceptibly cooler toward Derek, measurably warmer toward Margaret. Your mother. How lovely. We were just having a fascinating conversation about authentic experience versus performative living. My mother doesn't really do philosophy, Derek laughed, the sound nervous and dismissive. She's more of a practical person. Coupons and bus schedules and, you know, that kind of thing. The temperature around Elena dropped by several degrees. How extraordinarily reductive. She turned deliberately back to Margaret, excluding Derek from the conversation with body language so subtle and so devastating that several nearby people noticed the power shift. Tell me, Margaret, may I call you Margaret? Maggie, please, Maggie. Elena said the name like tasting something rare and exquisite. What do you do when you're not being catastrophically underestimated by people who should know better? Margaret felt something unlock in her chest. I read. I volunteer at literacy programs. I work on projects that interest me. What kind of projects? Engineering projects. Civil infrastructure, mostly. Some AI applications for autonomous vehicle systems. Whatever keeps my mind active. Elena leaned in slightly, not inappropriately, but enough that Margaret caught her perfume, cedar and amber, expensive and understated, the kind of scent that whispered rather than shouted. AI applications for autonomous systems? That's not exactly coupon clipping territory. No, Margaret agreed softly. It's not, Derek laughed again, too loud, too forced. Mom's exaggerating. She used to do some drafting work back in the day. Before she retired. Nothing like what we're doing now with real AI and blockchain integration, drafting work. Elena repeated the words slowly, her eyes still locked on Margaret's face, her expression shifting from interested to intrigued to something sharper. How extraordinarily modest of you to downplay your career. Margaret felt something building, momentum, revelation, the approaching crescendo of 4 years of calculated patience. I've learned, she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness, that people see what they expect to see. If they expect small, they see small. Regardless of what's actually there, Elena's smile became brilliant. And what happens when someone expects to see something extraordinary? Then they usually do. The air between them was charged now, electric with tension that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with recognition. Two people who understood immediately that they were playing a different game than everyone else in the room. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his neural implant probably registering elevated stress hormones, his carefully constructed narrative starting to feel unstable in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Vivian appeared with her phone. Extended, sensing content opportunities the way sharks sense blood. Babe, the investors want you for the demo. Oh, who's this? This is my mother, Derek said flatly, the words heavy with resignation. And Elena Volkov, Elena added, extending her hand to Vivian without warmth. Real estate attorney. And you are, Vivian Zhang. Influencer. 500,000 followers. She stated it like credentials, like a resume line that should impress. How nice, Elena said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. She turned back to Margaret, dismissing Vivian with the kind of social efficiency that only truly confident people could execute. You were about to tell me about your engineering work. Margaret looked out the window, her eyes finding the Morrison Bridge, lit beautifully against the night sky, its suspended walkway system a testament to innovative design and mathematical precision. That bridge, she said quietly. The Morrison Bridge. With the suspended walkway system and the integrated sensor network, Elena followed her gaze, her posture shifting to full attention. I designed the load distribution algorithm that allowed them to reduce material costs by 30% without compromising structural integrity. It won 3 international engineering awards. 4, Elena corrected, her voice sharp with sudden intensity. 4 awards. I know because I've studied it extensively. The Morrison Bridge revolutionized sustainable infrastructure design. Every urban development firm has been analyzing that project for 5 years, trying to replicate the efficiency. She turned to stare at Margaret, her expression transforming from polite interest to genuine astonishment. You're M. Chin. You're the M. Chin, co-designer, Margaret corrected modestly. It was a team effort, you're M. Chin, Elena repeated, and laughed, delighted, incredulous, victorious. I've read your papers on autonomous vehicle routing systems. They're brilliant. They're being implemented in 15 major cities worldwide. They fundamentally changed how we think about AI-assisted traffic management and urban flow optimization. The conversations around them had started to quiet. People were listening now, their neural implants probably recording, social media algorithms already identifying this as potentially viral content. Derek's face had gone the color of old paper. What papers? The ones, Elena said, turning to look at him with something between pity and contempt, that make your crypto trading app look like a child's crayon drawing compared to the Sistine Chapel. Your mother is a revolutionary civil engineer whose work is literally shaping the future of urban infrastructure and autonomous transportation systems. And you just called it drafting work, Uncle Richard, sensing something significant happening and desperate to regain control of the situation, approached with his practiced salesman smile. His AR contacts were probably feeding him emergency scripts, suggesting ways to redirect the conversation. Elena. Ready for that meeting about the property investment? We should probably, actually, Richard. Elena's voice was pleasant but her eyes were glacial. I need to ask you something first. This penthouse we're standing in. Who owns it? Richard hesitated, his smile faltering. Well, technically it's still in Maggie's name from when David passed, but we all understand it's really Derek's place, so Margaret owns it. Legally. On paper. In the only way that actually matters, on paper, yes, but in practice, on paper. Where property rights are determined. Elena looked at Margaret, her expression shifting to something like admiration. You own this building? The whole building. Margaret said quietly, feeling 4 years of silence finally breaking. 4 years. Since shortly after my husband died. Margaret's voice carried now, clear and steady, cutting through the ambient music and the shocked silence. I wanted to see what kind of man he'd become if he thought he'd made it on his own. If he'd stay kind and humble, or if success, even borrowed success, would change him. I wanted to see if he'd value me for who I am, not what I have. She looked directly at Derek, who stood frozen with his champagne glass halfway to his lips. Now I know. Derek's face went from pale to red, his voice rising with panic and humiliation. This is my place. Dad left it for me. You can't just, Dad left everything to me, Margaret interrupted. Her quiet voice somehow more powerful than his shouting. Including this building, the investment portfolio, and the patent rights to the autonomous vehicle systems your father and I developed together. She pulled out her phone, that old, outdated device everyone had assumed she couldn't afford to upgrade, and with practiced efficiency, connected it to the penthouse's smart display system. Her banking interface appeared on the massive wall screen, enlarged for the entire party to see. Margaret Chin, account summary, checking account, $127,840. Investment portfolio, $18,247,293. Real estate holdings, $4,820,000. Foundation endowment, $1,240,000. Total liquid net worth, $24. 435,133. The room erupted in chaos, gasps, whispers, the sound of 50 people simultaneously accessing their own devices to verify, to screenshot, to document this moment for later analysis. I've been living modestly, Margaret continued, her voice cutting through the noise, because I choose to, not because I have to. I wanted to see if you'd value me for who I am, not what I have. I wanted to see if you'd become a man who measures worth by character instead of capital accumulation and social media metrics. Aunt Linda's voice cracked with desperation. Maggie, even so, your lifestyle choices are eccentric. The bus rides, the Tupperware, the discount clothing, the bus rides. Elena cut in sharply, stepping closer to Margaret in a gesture that was both protective and possessive, are because Maggie's other vehicle is in routine maintenance. Tell me, Maggie, what do you drive when the Camry's working? Margaret sighed. I mostly use the Camry. It's practical for city driving, and the environmental impact is reasonable, and when you don't, a pause. The Tesla, which model? The custom prototype. From 2019. Before they were commercially available, Elena's smile was brilliant now, victorious, her hand finding Margaret's and holding it publicly, deliberately. The prototype? The one they only manufactured 6 of for primary testing partners and development consultants? Yes, Elena turned to address the room, her voice carrying with professional authority that demanded attention. For those of you who don't follow automotive innovation, Margaret Shen was one of the primary consultants for Tesla's autonomous driving system development program. She has a prototype vehicle that's currently worth approximately $2.1 million and is literally featured in 3 technology museums. She takes the bus because she's environmentally conscious and socially engaged with her community. Not because she has to. Because she chooses to. She pulled out her own phone, projecting additional documents onto a second screen. Derek's crypto app, Crypto Flow, received its seed funding from Chin Autonomous Systems Ventures. A fund that Maggie established 5 years ago after selling her autonomous vehicle patents for $18.2 million to a consortium of automotive manufacturers. Derek applied like any other entrepreneur through the standard submission process. He was approved because his business plan was solid and showed promise. But he thought the funding came from his father's former business partner. She looked at Derek, her expression cold with professional distance. It came from your mother. Through legal intermediaries and venture capital structures designed to maintain entrepreneurial independence. She wanted you to feel like you'd earned your success. Like you'd built something real. Uncle Richard's face had drained of all color. His AR contacts probably running emergency financial calculations. You sold the patents? For $18 million, $18,200,000, Margaret corrected with precision. I've been investing it systematically. In real estate, including 2 other commercial properties in this city. In renewable energy infrastructure projects. In a foundation that funds women in STEM fields who face the same barriers I once did. My current net worth is approximately $24.4 million, though market fluctuations mean that number changes daily. Elena stepped even closer to Margaret, her body language unmistakably intimate now, her voice softer but still carrying. I've been helping Maggie establish her foundation for 6 months. We've been meeting weekly to structure the endowment, select scholarship recipients, establish partnerships with universities and research institutions. In that time, I've learned that she's not just brilliant, she's generous, thoughtful, and completely unbothered by the opinions of people who measure worth in Instagram followers and luxury brand associations. She took Margaret's hand, bold, deliberate, public, holding it up between them like a declaration. I've also learned that she's been enduring this family's contempt for years while secretly supporting most of you financially. Richard, your last 3 property developments were partially financed through Maggie's investment fund, loans you took without knowing the source. Linda, your daughter's private school tuition? Covered by a merit scholarship that Maggie anonymously funded because she knew you were over-leveraged. And Derek, she looked at him, her voice dropping to something cold and factual. Your mother has been paying your penthouse utilities, your building insurance, and your property taxes for 4 years. Every month. The bills come to her as the property owner. You've never noticed because you've never asked a single question about how this lifestyle is actually financed. Derek was drunk now, champagne and humiliation mixing into something toxic and unstable. His carefully constructed self-image was crumbling in real time, broadcast to thousands of viewers on Vivian's live stream. Documented by dozens of phones held by people who would turn this into content, into cautionary tales, into viral moments of schadenfreude. You've been lying to me. His voice cracked, too loud, drawing attention from everyone who'd been trying to look away. Pretending to be poor. Running some kind of sick social experiment on your own son. I never pretended anything, Margaret said firmly, her voice steady and clear. You assumed. Based on surface appearances and your own biases. I simply didn't correct you because I wanted to see who you'd become without my wealth influencing your choices and relationships. You manipulated me. This whole time, you've been testing me like I'm some kind of lab rat. Derek, you're intoxicated. We should discuss this tomorrow when you're sober and can think clearly, no. He was shouting now, stumbling slightly, his neural implant probably registering dangerous hormone levels, his smart fabric clothing shifting to chaotic patterns that reflected his emotional state. You don't get to control me anymore. You don't get to judge me from your fake moral high ground while you were secretly rich the whole time. I'm not judging you, Derek. I'm just finally seeing you clearly. And accepting what I see. Derek lunged forward, his hand raised. Not quite a fist, but the threat was unmistakable, his body language aggressive, his mother flinching backward instinctively. And for one terrible moment suspended in time, it seemed like he might actually strike her. Elena moved with shocking speed, she was between them instantly, one hand catching Derek's wrist in a grip that looked gentle but was clearly iron, the kind of hold that came from serious self-defense training, from understanding leverage and pressure points, from knowing exactly how to control someone's movement without causing visible harm. Her voice dropped to something deadly quiet, more terrifying than shouting could ever be. Touch her and I will have you arrested so fast your entitled little head will spin. Battery, assault, threatening violence against a landlord, whatever charges I can make stick. And I have very, very expensive lawyers who win cases for sport rather than necessity. The room was frozen. Vivian's live stream now had 23,847 viewers. At least 6 other people were recording on their phones. This moment would be everywhere by morning, analyzed, memed, dissected by people who'd never met any of them but would have opinions anyway. Margaret stepped around Elena, looking at her son, really looking at him, seeing past the performance to the person underneath, and something in her expression shifted from disappointed to decided. Get out, she said quietly. What? Get out. This is my property. You're living here under a month-to-month lease agreement that I can legally terminate with 24 hours notice for cause, and threatening violence against the landlord definitely constitutes cause. I'm terminating it now. You have until 7 p.m. tomorrow to remove your belongings. After that, building security will escort you out and change the locks. You can't do that. I absolutely can. Elena, you're a real estate attorney. Is 24-hour notice legal in this jurisdiction for month-to-month tenancy when the tenant threatens the landlord? It is, Elena confirmed, still holding Derek's wrist in that deceptively gentle grip. Technically, you could evict him immediately for threatening behavior. You're being generous with 24 hours, Margaret repeated, her voice breaking slightly but holding firm. That's 24 hours more than you've given me of basic respect in the past 4 years. Mom, please, I didn't mean, your father would be ashamed of you. The words hit like physical blows. I raised you to be better than this. To value people over possessions. To build things that matter, not just things that photograph well. You had every advantage, every opportunity, every resource, and you became exactly what I was afraid you'd become." She turned toward the door, her hand finding Elena's, their fingers interlacing with natural ease. 24 hours, Derek. Don't make me involve law enforcement." They walked toward the elevator together, Margaret and Elena, hand in hand, leaving behind a room full of people who would spend the next week processing what they'd just witnessed, recalibrating their understanding of success and value and the difference between appearance and reality. Behind them, Derek stood frozen, his world collapsing, his live-streamed humiliation just beginning to process through the viral content machine, and Margaret, for the first time in 4 years, felt like she could finally breathe. Margaret walked toward the penthouse elevator with Elena's hand hovering protectively near the small of her back, not touching, but present, a silent declaration of alliance. The party guests parted like water around them, everyone filming, everyone whispering into their neural implants, everyone calculating how to spin this story for maximum social capital. This would be the anecdote they told for years. The night someone's poor mother turned out to be a multi-millionaire engineering genius and evicted her own son in front of 50 witnesses and 24,000 live-stream viewers. Margaret's old purse hung over her shoulder, its fabric strap worn smooth from years of use. Her Tupperware of dumplings sat abandoned on the kitchen counter, homemade food at a catered event, analog sentiment in a digital world. Uncle Richard materialized at the elevator, his augmented reality contacts probably feeding him emergency scripts, his face a mask of concern that didn't reach his calculating eyes. "Maggie, let's not be hasty." His voice carried the false warmth of practiced negotiation. "Derek's under tremendous stress with the launch. He's had too much to drink." "He didn't mean anything, Richard." Elena's voice was cold enough to frost glass. "Step aside or I'll add harassment of a protected party to the growing list of legal problems this family is about to face." "Legal problems?" Richard's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "We're family, the foundation Maggie and I have been building for 6 months." Elena's smile was sharp as surgical steel. "We've been documenting everything. Every time someone in this family has solicited money from her while simultaneously mocking her lifestyle. Every time you've pressured her to sell you property at below market rates while insulting her intelligence. Every financial favor you've accepted while treating her like she's worthless and ignorant." She pulled out her phone, projecting a document onto the elevator's smart glass. 4 years of documented interactions. Time-stamped messages. Recorded conversations, all legal in this jurisdiction with single-party consent. Bank transfers showing you've been borrowing from her investment fund while telling Derek she was a financial burden. "We have everything." Richard's face drained of color as he scanned the document. "You've been recording us, I've been protecting my client. And Elena glanced at Margaret, something warm flickering in her expression before returning to professional ice. "My friend. I suggest you back off." Now, the elevator doors opened. Margaret and Elena stepped inside. Richard stood frozen in the hallway, his AR contacts probably running damage control algorithms, calculating legal exposure and financial consequences. The doors closed on chaos, Derek shouting something incoherent, Vivian crying because her livestream comments section had turned viciously against her, investors quietly activating their neural implants to cancel follow-up meetings. The party dissolving into toxic gossip that would feed the tech industry rumor mill for months. Margaret sagged against the elevator wall as they descended. Her hands were shaking, fine tremors that started in her fingers and radiated outward, adrenaline crash hitting hard now that the performance was over. "Breathe," Elena said quietly, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. "In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. You're safe now." Margaret followed the instructions, her breath catching on something that might have been a sob or might have been laughter or might have been both. "I just evicted my son," she said to the elevator's mirrored wall. "I just destroyed my family." What kind of mother does that? The kind who sets boundaries with someone who threatened violence. Elena's voice was firm, factual. "That's not destruction. That's self-preservation." The elevator opened to the lobby, marble floors, minimalist furniture, a night security guard who nodded respectfully at Margaret because he knew who actually signed his paychecks. Elena guided her outside into the cool night air. The city hummed around them, autonomous vehicles gliding silently past, holographic advertisements shifting in building windows, the ambient glow of millions of neural implants and smart devices creating artificial twilight. Margaret stood on the sidewalk and felt untethered from reality. Like she might float away if Elena wasn't there anchoring her to the ground. Coffee? Elena asked gently. Or something stronger? Though I remember you mentioned you don't drink coffee, Margaret managed. I'm 15 years sober. I don't usually tell people, but then coffee it is. Elena's smile was soft with understanding. I know a place. Terrible coffee, excellent pie, zero Instagram aesthetic. Very mediocre establishment that hasn't been algorithmically optimized for anything except actually serving food. Despite everything, Margaret laughed, a small, broken sound that hurt her chest. They walked 3 blocks to an all-night diner that existed in defiance of every modern design principle. Vinyl booths with duct tape repairs. Laminate tables scarred by decades of coffee cups. Fluorescent lighting that buzzed faintly and flickered occasionally. A waitress in her 60s who called everyone Han and wrote orders on a paper pad with an actual pen. Elena slid into a booth and ordered without consulting Margaret, 2 coffees. 2 slices of apple pie. Heated, with ice cream. The waitress nodded and walked away without scanning them with facial recognition tech, without asking to access their payment implants, without any of the invasive convenience that defined modern service. Margaret sat across from Elena and felt something in her chest unclench slightly. You knew I'd want pie? She asked. I know you've had the worst night of your life and pie helps. Universal truth. Elena paused, her fingers playing with the edge of a paper napkin. Also, I've been wanting an excuse to take you for coffee for 6 months, and this seemed like an opportunity. Terrible circumstances, but still, Margaret stared at her. You've wanted to take me for coffee, among other things. Elena's voice was careful, testing. But mostly I've wanted time with you that wasn't structured around foundation business and legal documents. Time where we could just...
He raised his hand to me, Margaret whispered. For a moment, I thought he was actually going to hit me, I know. Elena's jaw tightened. If I hadn't been there, but you were. Margaret looked up, meeting Elena's eyes. Why were you there? I sent that text about the party, but I didn't really expect you to come. We barely know each other outside of foundation meetings and legal paperwork. Elena set down her coffee carefully, her fingers tracing patterns in the condensation on the cup. Do you want the professional answer or the honest one? Honest, I've been half in love with you since our 3rd meeting. The words came out quickly, like Elena had been holding them back for months and couldn't anymore. When you explained your vision for the foundation, supporting women in STEM not because it's trending on social media but because you remember being the only woman in every engineering classroom, the only female voice in every patent negotiation. When you talked about using wealth to create opportunities instead of displaying it for validation or status, she looked directly at Margaret, her expression vulnerable in a way her professional armor never allowed. You're extraordinary. And I've been watching your family treat you like you're invisible, like you're worthless, like you're some embarrassing obligation they have to manage. 4 months. Tonight, I couldn't stand it anymore. Margaret's breath caught. Half in love with me, completely in love with you, if I'm being fully honest. But half seemed less terrifying to admit to someone who might not feel the same way. The diner hummed around them, the hiss of the grill, the murmur of other late-night patrons, the waitress refilling coffee cups with practiced efficiency. The world continued spinning, indifferent to the moment crystallizing between them. Margaret didn't think. She leaned across the table, knocking her fork slightly, nearly upsetting the water glass, and kissed Elena. Soft, tentative, tasting of coffee and pie and something like hope she hadn't felt in years, Elena made a small surprised sound. Then kissed back, her hand coming up to cup Margaret's face gently, her thumb brushing Margaret's cheekbone with careful tenderness. They broke apart. The waitress pretended not to notice. A teenager in the corner booth gave them an enthusiastic thumbs up. An elderly couple smiled at them with warmth. I haven't done that in 20 years, Margaret said, breathless, kissed someone in a diner, kissed anyone. Period. David died 7 years ago. I've been alone. By choice, mostly. I didn't think I wanted anyone else, and now? Elena's voice was careful, hopeful. Now I'm terrified and confused, and I just evicted my son, and my whole family probably hates me, and I have no idea what I'm doing with my life anymore. Margaret laughed, the sound edging toward hysteria. So naturally, this seems like the perfect time to start a relationship with someone 14 years younger than me who I barely know outside of legal consultations. 15 years younger, Elena corrected with a slight smile. I'm 37. And we're not starting a relationship right this second. We're having coffee and pie at 2 a.m. after you did the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. Everything else can wait. She reached across the table and took Margaret's hand. But for the record, I don't think you barely know me. I think we've been getting to know each other for 6 months through foundation work and legal meetings and coffee breaks where we talked about everything except what we were really feeling. I think you know me better than most people in my life. Margaret looked at their joined hands, hers weathered and scarred from years of engineering work, Elena's smooth and elegant with perfectly manicured nails. I'm 52 years old, Elena. I have a son who just threatened me in public. I have a family that's going to spend the next month trying to destroy my reputation or manipulate me into giving them money. I have 15 years of sobriety that I'm terrified of losing if the stress gets too bad. I'm not exactly a catch. You designed the Morrison Bridge. You revolutionized autonomous vehicle systems. You built a $24 million fortune and lived modestly to test whether people would value you for your character. You established a foundation to help women who faced the same barriers you once did. You just set a boundary with someone you love because they threatened violence. Elena's voice was firm, definite. You're exactly the kind of person I want in my life. If you'll have me, I don't know what I want anymore, Margaret admitted. 24 hours ago, I knew exactly who I was. Now everything's different, then let's figure it out together. No pressure. No expectations. Just coffee. And pie. And conversations that aren't about legal documents or foundation bylaws. Margaret squeezed Elena's hand. I'd like that. They stayed in the diner until 3 a.m., talking. Margaret told Elena about David's death, the car accident 7 years ago. The 2 years of drinking herself numb afterward, the moment she'd hit rock bottom and decided to get sober. Elena told Margaret about growing up with immigrant parents who'd sacrificed everything for her education, about law school debt that took a decade to repay, about building her practice from nothing because she didn't have family connections or generational wealth. They talked about loneliness and ambition, about choosing values over visibility, about what success actually meant when you stripped away the performance of it. At some point, their hands stayed clasped across the table. At some point, the conversation shifted from painful honesty to something lighter, shared jokes. Comfortable silences, the easy rhythm of two people who fit together in ways neither had expected. The waitress brought them more coffee without being asked. The pie plates were cleared away. The diner's fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed, and Margaret felt something in her chest unclench completely. What happens tomorrow? She asked finally. Derek has 24 hours to move out. The family is going to implode. This is going to be everywhere. Vivian's live stream probably went viral. The tech industry gossip networks are going to tear me apart. Tomorrow, Elena said, we deal with logistics. I'll have building security implement the eviction protocol. I'll send cease and desist letters to anyone who tries to harass or manipulate you. I'll make sure Derek has resources for moving services and temporary housing, because you're generous even when people don't deserve it. She paused. And then, if you want, we can have dinner. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere that doesn't serve algorithmically optimized food or require social media documentation. Just us, like a date? Margaret's voice was tentative, like a date. If you're ready. If not, like two friends having dinner. Whatever you need. Margaret thought about it, about Derek packing his belongings, about the family chaos, about viral videos and industry gossip and all the noise that would surround her for weeks. And then she thought about sitting across from Elena in a quiet restaurant. Talking about things that mattered, building something real, a date, she decided. Let's call it a date. Elena's smile was brilliant. Then it's a date. Margaret's phone started buzzing at 6:47 a.m., messages accumulating faster than she could process them. She silenced it and made coffee in her small kitchen, the morning routine grounding her after the chaos of the previous night. Elena had insisted on walking her home, had waited until Margaret was safely inside her building before calling a car service. They'd exchanged numbers, actual phone numbers, not just professional contacts, and Elena had texted almost immediately, "Made it home. Sleep well. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." Now Margaret sat at her small kitchen table and opened her phone to face the digital avalanche. "Derek, Mom, please, we need to talk. This is insane. I'm sorry, I was drunk. Please don't do this." Sent 3:47 a.m. Uncle Richard. "We need to discuss this rationally. Family meeting tomorrow. Mandatory." Sent 4:12 a.m. Aunt Linda, "I can't believe you'd humiliate Derek like that. We raised you better than this." Sent 4:38 a.m. Margaret deleted all 3 messages without responding. Her email was worse. Dozens of messages from tech journalists requesting interviews, from bloggers wanting her story, from Derek's investors asking for clarification about the funding source. Vivian's live stream had been clipped and shared across every social.
Elena's response came within minutes. "It's real. Dr. Chen is legitimate. Also, I'm outside your building with better coffee than you make and croissants from the good bakery. Can I come up?" Margaret looked around her small apartment. Dishes in the sink, engineering journals scattered across the couch, everything comfortable but not exactly impressive. Then she thought about Elena's words from the diner. "You're exactly the kind of person I want in my life." She texted back, "Apartment 3B. Doors unlocked." Elena arrived carrying expensive coffee in a white bakery bag, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual professional attire. She looked younger, more relaxed, more like someone who might actually fit into Margaret's modest life. "How are you holding up?" Elena asked, setting the coffee on the kitchen table, terrified. Relieved. Guilty. Angry. Confused. Margaret took a croissant. "So, about average," Elena smiled. "That sounds healthy, actually." Processing is good. They sat at Margaret's small table, eating breakfast, not talking about Derek or the family or the viral videos. Instead, Elena told stories about her work, about difficult clients and courtroom victories, about building a practice that prioritized ethics over profits. At 9:15 a.m., Margaret's phone buzzed with a building security alert. "Eviction notice served to Unit 43A. Tenant has acknowledged receipt." 24-hour countdown initiated. Elena glanced at the notification. "Do you want to be there when he moves out?" "No," Margaret said firmly. "I want him to have privacy. And I want distance. For both of us, that's reasonable." Elena pulled out her tablet. "I've arranged for professional movers if he needs them. Paid in advance, from your account, because you're kind even when people hurt you. I've also prepared a letter outlining his options, temporary housing resources, contact information for my firm if he needs legal advice, a reminder that you're willing to discuss reconciliation once he's stable and sober. You didn't have to do all that, I wanted to." "And Maggie?" Elena looked up from the tablet. "You're not a monster for setting boundaries. You're not cruel for protecting yourself. You gave him 4 years and infinite chances. What happened last night was the consequence of his own choices." Margaret nodded, not trusting herself to speak. At 11 a.m., Elena stood to leave. "I have a client meeting. But dinner tonight? That date we talked about, I'd like that." "Good." Elena hesitated at the door, then turned back and kissed Margaret softly. "You're going to get through this. And you're not going to do it alone anymore." After Elena left, Margaret sat at her kitchen table and looked at her phone. The messages kept coming, family demanding explanations, journalists requesting interviews, strangers offering opinions on her parenting. She turned off notifications and opened her engineering journals instead. The world could wait. For once, Margaret Chen was going to focus on herself, the Women in Engineering Institute conference was held in a hotel convention center that had been renovated to minimize technological overwhelm, actual printed programs, optional neural implant integration, spaces designed for human connection rather than algorithmic networking. Margaret stood backstage, wearing the outfit Elena had helped her choose. Professional but comfortable, expensive in an understated way that no longer felt like performance. Her keynote speech was loaded on her tablet, 3,000 words about values versus visibility. About measuring success by impact rather than appearance, about building things that mattered. Elena sat in the third row, smiling encouragement. Dr. Aisha Chen was introducing her, revolutionized urban infrastructure, pioneered autonomous vehicle systems, and recently established a foundation supporting women in STEM. Please welcome Dr. Margaret Chen. Margaret walked onto the stage to applause. 500 women, students, professionals, academics, entrepreneurs, looked at her with interest, respect, maybe even inspiration. She thought about Derek, who'd moved into a modest apartment and started therapy. They'd had coffee twice in the past 3 months, awkward, painful conversations where he was starting to understand what he'd lost and why. Reconciliation wasn't guaranteed, but the possibility existed. She thought about Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda, who'd been quietly cut off from family funds and were learning to live within their actual means. She thought about Vivian, whose follower count had dropped by 200,000 after people realized her lifestyle content was built on lies. But mostly, she thought about Elena, waiting in the audience, proud and supportive, planning their weekend trip to see the Morrison Bridge in person. Talking about moving in together, about building a life that measured success by shared values rather than visible achievements. Margaret stepped up to the microphone and smiled. "Good morning," she said. "I want to tell you a story about invisibility, about values, and about what happens when you stop performing for people who never really saw you in the first place." She began her speech, and the women in the audience leaned forward, listening. Outside the convention center, the city hummed with its algorithms and implants and endless performance of success. But inside, 500 women heard a different kind of story, about quiet strength, about authentic achievement, about choosing character over capital. And Margaret, for the first time in years, felt completely visible in all the ways that actually mattered. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Margaret barely heard it. She was too busy looking at Elena, who was crying and smiling and mouthing the words, "I love you." Margaret mouthed back, "I love you too." The world kept spinning. The algorithms kept calculating. The performance of success continued everywhere, relentless and exhausting. But Margaret Chen had finally stopped performing, and that, she discovered, was the greatest success of all.